And the sentence reads, we continue to spend significant time on clarifying what the 0.8 DIN limit does and does not mean for farmers who will be supplied by the RWSS, in contrast with farmers who are not supplied. For us slow learners, could you still explain, try again to explain to me what the difference is that is being explained under this scenario? My understanding is that all farmers are going to need to live under Plan Change 6's requirements and be subject to whatever DIN regime with whatever language is agreed to at the end of the day. So I'm not quite sure what's the distinction here that's being assumed.
So I'll ask Andrew to speak about the meetings that have been had with farmers, but RWSS has a global land use consent and a set of water use consents which apply to all of the parties that contract water from the RWSS if it is built. That set of consents, as the Board of Inquiry's most recent draft decision points out, with a degree of clarity that would have been helpful actually if they'd said this in their final decision a year ago, that its decision is made under the discretionary rules of the Regional Resource Management Plan. It is able to take into account broader things, and it is taken into account, and I'm probably paraphrasing a little bit loosely here, it is taken into account the economic and social benefits of the scheme, and it has not required the scheme to comply with the 0.8 DIN limit. If you like, a trade-off has been made, and that is the point of the discretionary rules. RWSS has never had to live within the permitted activity rules of which Rule TT1J is one of a large number. And Rule TT1J says if the river in which your farm is situated is above 0.8 DIN, you have to get a resource consent. But if you're a farm in that area and you are being supplied water to intensify your land use from the RWSS, you live within the land use consents and the water use consents of the RWSS, and no 0.8 DIN limit is applicable.
So, just to follow up, would it therefore be fair to say that the case to a farmer is that if you wish to escape the DIN limits, buy water?
Well, nice soundbite there, but perhaps Andrew was going to explain the farmer meetings.
Simple terms, we've had 7 meetings over the past couple of weeks, face-to-face meetings with numbers of farmers, and it's really those parties that are in a contracting pipeline, so it's not broader than that at this point, and it is simply clarifying what the RWSS consents oblige both the scheme and farmers to undertake, and the regulatory thresholds they've got to meet, which are significant, but equally, what certainty does it give them? And it's pretty simple, it gives them 35 years of certainty. That's the nature of the conversation. And I do note, and perhaps I'll just make the point, is that there has been conjecture in the media from some parties is that it's all too uncertain. Interestingly. But our purpose is to engage directly with our customers, as any business would do, and that's exactly what we're doing around what is this level of certainty and what's not. Now, that's not to say the process is quite finished yet, but the process is, I would point out, getting extremely narrow. So in other words, the points of debate now are down to a very, very, very narrow level in terms of those consent conditions. And we'll see what the Board of Inquiry does with its final decision, which I guess they're going to hopefully issue relatively soon.
While we're still talking about uptake, I just note in the report it says that somewhere between 37 and 40,000 hectares of irrigable land are available in the command area, and we don't think that we can supply all of that. That's actually quite helpful. It means that there's competition and price tension to purchase water in the later part of the demand uptake period, and that's very helpful in terms of our confidence that we will ultimately build up the demand from the scheme to pretty close to its maximum capacity.
So I've got a question around uptake. Have you been following the weather patterns? El Nino seems to be on the horizon again.
I think it's fair to say, perhaps I'll answer that, Chairman, it's definitely on the mind of either both current and potential irrigators, significantly on their mind. Fair to say that though that if there's a point of frustration that the Ruataniwha water storage scheme is not sitting there today supplying water, so they're going to endure it regardless of this deal.
Further questions, Councillor
Yeah,
Baird?
just on that matter, and we're probably drifting on to the next point. We all know there's now going to be a 1-year delay in the construction. What impact is that going to have on the price to build?
I can only answer that by a process point. Is that one thing we have scheduled with the constructor, but we haven't flicked a switch on yet, as a price revalidation. We'll do that formally at the right point in time. That's built into our budget actually. And at this stage, it's fair to say though that there's a significant amount of price pressure on construction and in particular heavy civil in this country. There's not a lot of it going on. Well, I guess if you had sustained,
optimistic it won't go up.
no, if you, it'd be great, wouldn't it? But all I'm pointing out is the inflationary environment in relation to heavy civil is actually in our favour. So, and that's pretty self-evident actually.
If you look at key elements of the building construction index, so fuel, cement,
Yep.
steel, all that kind of stuff, it's flat or trending down. So we don't think there's going to be a huge increase in the price, and we're reasonably closely tied to that construction cost index. So
We're going to get our concrete and bleachers.
We don't have any concrete needed.
that's up to the contractor.
Given their profits of all from their own producers, I'm very worried.
Right, well, we're on to the next stage. Any further questions on, before we get to the financials? So let's talk financials.
Righto. So looking at the financial reports on page 50 of the agenda, and focusing on the bottom half of the page, which is the RWS Phase 2 Development Expenditure Budget. For the Phase 2 costs, we were a little bit under budget for the month, 143,000 against 180,000. And that sort of reflects the fact that we're in a little bit of a holding pattern around waiting on final consent conditions from the Board of Inquiry. Where we have had a little bit of sort of frustration is around the cost of the EPA process. So we had at the time budgeted a total for the EPA process in High Court of 356,000. This process has become a lot more complex than first envisaged. We now have a significant overrun there, with costs expected to be 646,000. On the basis that a majority of, some of these costs are related to plan change. Conversation has been had with council management regarding their share of these costs, and to date we have come to a figure of 200,000 that council will pick up of this overrun. So that's the key part at the moment. The rest is pretty self-explanatory on pages 48 and 49, so happy to take any questions.
Councillor Graham.
Just one question. So your budget said you're going to get to 18 mil next month. 2 mil of that is consultants, which are you going to spend 2 million on consultants next month and get to that 18 mil, or are you going to be under?
Sorry, what numbers? Sorry.
Year to date budget, total development expenditure funding 18 mil, and you're sitting at 14 mil at the moment.
So that's the project budget through to financial close.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's to February 16, not to the end of the financial year.
Oh,
So the top half of the report is the operating report, which
I
is
get it. Sorry, I missed that date. It's to 16,
yeah, that's correct.
February 16.
No, we're certainly not spending $4 million next month.
So it will cost you, still the question's still relevant, another 2 million on consultants to February 16?
That is the plan, yes.
Councillor Pipe.
Just a couple of questions. Just at the bottom of page 48, can you give us an update on the Department of Conservation land exchange aspect, please?
Oh, not a great moment, other than DOC continues to work through its process, and we're just awaiting that outcome. They've undertaken a bit more, some more independent work themselves in terms of assessing the values in the exchange, and you know, we're just like everybody else waiting their process. So I expect it's probably be released reasonably soon.
Second question is just with regards to the analysis of the channel efficiencies for the Tuki-Tuk and the Waipawa. Can you just give us a...
Oh, yes, that channel efficiencies is an interesting pseudonym for it. What it simply relates to, though, Councillor Pipe, is that what we've done is we've done quite a bit of work on the losing reach issue. What we have in both the Waipawa and in the Tuki-Tuki tributary is if you flow water down, it drops, and in the Waipawa it does substantially. So what we've done is we've done a whole lot more detailed work over this past summer and early autumn period around detailed hydrological work looking at the absolute parameters of that. So what it's done is broadly validated the losing reach issues we have in the Waipawa, and it's given us more confidence that if we release, which goes back to my early comment around water release for downriver users, if we release water down the Tuki, then we have both losing reach and a gaining reach, which work quite closely in sync. So that's what that work's about. And I mean, we're always part of the drive for it equally was to see whether we could optimise, in particular, the distribution network and headways. So that's what that is.
Can I ask,
I'll keep coming around. Councillor Barker.
can I ask a question on that? When you say losing reach, does that mean the water doesn't, I presume water just doesn't vaporise and disappear?
No.
The water goes out of the stem of the river
Yep.
into the aquifers where it is available for others, for draw-off on that particular core.
Well, it depends. Yeah. So look, and so I'll answer this. There's really two questions in that question, Councillor Barker. But in simple terms, when we talk about a losing reach, the water drops into the groundwater, into the aquifer, and from a water supply, and this is the key issue, from a water supply perspective, you need to know that the water that potentially dropped in the groundwater reappeared in a time frame that was relevant to your supply time frame.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's lost to the system. That's the issue.
Yep.
Okay, so and it's where it has an impact. For example, if we were, I'll just theorise, if we were using the Waipawa as a main conduit for water down to the main stem and therefore down to lower river water users, and we said, well, okay, we're contracting for a cubic metre of water off the dam down the Waipawa, reappears at the bottom end of the river, in for example, a minimum flow ban period, irrigation ban period. Well, the losing reach in the Waipawa prevents that from being a viable supply option. That's the real point, is that water does go to groundwater and reappears at some future point in the flows, but it's all about time. That's essentially it. Now, the extent to which other users can use it is that clearly that's a regulatory issue and a water allocation issue. So that's either enabled or constrained by the groundwater allocation regime that prevails in terms of the regulation.
Yeah, and it's probably, can I just add one little bit before you have your next question? Within the Tuki-Tuki, where the water disappears into the bed of the river, probably more correctly rather than into an aquifer.
Sure.
It reappears again in a very short time span, doesn't really recharge groundwater that would be accessible to anybody any significant distance away from the river.
Thank you. That's as I thought. My question is then, just as I just thought it through, to if, for example, we had someone on the lower Tuki-Tuki who you wanted to allocate water to, and they wanted to buy from the dam a cubic metre of water, And because of the losses on the way, you would presumably have to let flow more than the cubic metre. So there's a 50% loss, therefore you'd have to let 1.5 cubic metres go for them to be able to draw off their cubic metre, because otherwise you're drawing down less below the minimum flow. So would you charge them for the 1 cubic metre or the 1.5?
No, no, fair question, and actually, no, and that's a real question. That's actually something we've run through in our financials. The answer is no, they get charged for the water that they contract and the water that ends up actually delivered. That's the key point. They don't get charged for the losses. That's a financial risk against the scheme. But the point about the Tukui tributary and the fact that it's losing water to the bed and it's gaining means that actually we've netted that out as a financial issue, or in the process of doing it. Right? We definitely thought about it.
And many other schemes around the country have exactly the same issue. Opua being a really good example, where the water is tipped into the Opua, and the Opua River is actually the delivery system. Everybody else just pumps their water out of the river, and they have to be able to account for all of this as well. So other people are doing it.
Thank you, Councillor Balfour.
Yes, just a question on the final couple of paragraphs here, or the final paragraph. I'd like to understand better what the discretion is on the part of HBRC staff to pick up expenses, as you described as negotiating process here. So we just picked up $200,000 of cost here, and I guess there's some delegation of authority to do that sort of thing. Are there any limits on that is one question. Secondly, it's been a while since we had a sense, I think, of the total HBRC cost of this. Now, there are numbers in here about internal staff, but this area you've just been talking about, for example, of looking at the REACH, has a $19,000 price tag on it, which doesn't seem to automatically reflect who's doing that work. Was that our science people, whether that was people outside the organization, or what? So I guess my question is, when you look at this, it's still hard to get a fix on how much money is HBRC spending to move this whole project along. It's not a question really for you guys, it's for the chief executive, I guess.
Part of the question obviously is
Microphone, with a microphone.
No, the primary.
Okay.
Thank you. So first of all, in the last round of financial reforecasting, which I think was presented to you last month, we did, in the commentary there, give an update on the impact of Board of Inquiry and High Court costs on the budget that we had allocated for the whole Tukutuk catchment proposal, and indicated then that there were, because of the sort of, if you like, the go around on it, additional costs pending for the council, and in terms of the discretion, well, we've just tried to take a very pragmatic approach, because both Plan Change 6 and the Ruataniwha water storage consent conditions are subject to the draft final decision and have been through the High Court as well. So it's really trying to gain an assessment of particularly how much legal time has been spent, you know, in the various parts, and to an extent how much of the other expert time has been required, focusing on either Rule TT1J or more specifically on the consent condition. So we've done an assessment of that, but there's no formula, if you like, Councillor, for exactly how that's been determined.
So all I'm getting at, I guess, is this table is a product of HBRIC's analysis. That additional $200,000, for example, it would be hard to discover in this presentation where that is sitting. It's just a line item across, I mean, I see where it is here, Board of Inquiry referral, goes up to 646, but the fact that the regional council is paying 200 of that extra beyond whatever it was going to pay, is not transparent here. It's not, so
Well,
if
except.
somebody were to take a casual look at this, it looks like the only HBRC costs, let's say for the month of, budget month, April 15, was 40,000 of internal staff. And that's all I'm saying. It's not,
Okay, so if you go down, councillor, right to the, almost to the very bottom, third to bottom line on the page, it has a line there under RWSS Phase 2 development, HBRC share of the EPA process costs. The project budget was 664, and it's showing then the reforecast is 864, so it's recognising that that additional 200,000 from HBRC and that in terms of HBRIC's financial statements, and then as I explained in terms of the regional councils, we have indicated that in our reforecasting.
so back to my question, is environmental compliance 19,421, is that a regional council cost, or is that?
No, it's
No, it's an HBRIC cost. This is an HBRIC report, and all of the costs that are identified under RWSS Phase 2 costs on the page that you're referring to, I don't have the page number, are those that have been incurred by HBRIC. And if you go to the table, the line item that you called out, which says HBRC internal staff, that is HBRC's internal staff who have been contracted to HBRIC to do pieces of work. And this is exactly as it has been presented month after month for the last